I'm Avi Feingold, a rabbi and a writer with the Canadian Jewish News.
And I'm Yafa Sakeja, a Canadian Palestinian entrepreneur and volunteer with the Canadian Friends of Standing Together.
This is In Good Faith, a podcast about open-hearted questions from open-hearted people, sponsored by the Canadian Race Relations Foundation with support from the Ronald S. Roadberg Foundation. I hear this all the time from the people around me, and I think it's something that can be hard to understand from the outside. But a lot of Jews walk around feeling constantly under attack. And of course, I'm not talking about all Jews here. There is a significant part of the Jewish community that is extremely critical of the actions of Israel. But for the mainstream, for those that have deep and unconditional support for Israel, they feel like it's them against the world. Every dating profile that says no racists, no Zionists, every bakery with a "We Stand with Palestine" sign, they read, "You are not welcome here." Every professor in a keffiyeh, every post with a watermelon emoji says, "We stand against you." They feel unwanted, called out, despised. The idea that you could separate out loving Israel from Jewish identity is the worst of all. If you're not in the Jewish community, you may never have the frame of reference that will explain how jarring and hurtful it can be for many to hear that anti-Zionism isn't anti-Semitism.
I hear you loud and clear. And at the same time, I can understand completely while I can try to help explain what it means to me. It might not change how you feel. Whether it's watermelons or keffiyehs, these are nostalgic symbols of pride for us that remind us of our creed and our grandparents. And they were never, they were never meant to be symbols of hate.
How can you even start a conversation when words have such different meanings to different people?
Well, we know it doesn't work. It doesn't work to tell people to calm down or that they're overreacting. Clever memes don't work. Shame doesn't work. I think we could spend all day talking about the things that don't work, but what's way more interesting is what does work. Avi and I spoke to two people who are trying to answer just that. They're going across the country, listening, experimenting, trying to find out how to depolarize people out of a place of scarcity. And if these two are able to do it, there's more than a little hope for the rest of us.
I never expected in Canada to see a professor afraid to discuss a book.
Bashar always says to me, "I'm not going to be Canadian about this."
We avoid the blame game.
The participants are often excited to actually have an honest conversation and survive it.
Chapter 1, Bashar.
Bashar al-Shawwa didn't grow up imagining that one day he'd be on a podcast with the Canadian Jewish News.
So I ran from Israelis and Jews to Canada, and I ended up surrounded by many Jews in my life. And this wasn't expected.
The thing is, long ago, Bashar's destiny was bound together with the destiny of the Jewish people around him, even if he was born hundreds of miles from the place they both call home.
Yeah, so I unfortunately I wasn't born and raised in Palestine. I was born as a Palestinian refugee, as my father was born in 1947 in Jaffa, and after the Nakba in 1948, 1 year later, he and his family were displaced to Syria, ended up in a refugee camp. That's why I was born in Kuwait as a second-generation refugee. Due to Iraqi war, the Gulf War, the Iraqi invasion to Kuwait, we ended up displaced with around 500,000 Palestinians due to the political situation, and we had our tour in the Levant, Middle East area between Iraq, Syria, Jordan, trying to find a place that will allow us to live and to study.
Bashar's family fled from country to country, places where they had no past and no future, always strangers in a strange land.
Finally, in 1994, we've been for the first time home, where I ended up in Palestine. I maybe didn't mention that my family belongs from Gaza. My family, like Al-Shawwa family, is a deeply rooted family in the Gaza city.
Saeed al-Shawwa, Bashar's grandfather's first cousin, was the first mayor of Gaza in the early 1900s. Saeed had 5 sons. 2 of them also went on to become mayors of Gaza.
So that's why my entire family is based in Gaza. So we kept visiting the family, but we've been based in West Bank. And having these connections with the family when we came back was really good in establishing my character, that I was always that refugee, the alone kid, but back home I had a huge family. So I was really proud of having this family.
Safe and surrounded by community, Bashar's life stabilized. He went to high school, got a scholarship to study in Russia, and earned a degree in biomedical engineering.
So I went back home and start my future and my career at that time. Things were a kind of quiet and hopefully promising. And things went well until, unfortunately, one of the Gaza wars, one of these violence rounds happened in 2014. And this was like the changing point in my life.
Hamas wanted this war.
Hamas didn't kill the 3 Israeli teenagers. It was done by a lone actor.
Hamas members did.
So
they were acting as a local cell on behalf of Hamas.
At the time, Bashar says a lot of people his age were pretty cynical about the prospects for peace. They had witnessed a previous generation pursue Western-style diplomacy and handshakes on the White House lawn. But the only results they could see were more restrictions and more violence at the hands of Israeli soldiers.
I didn't honestly believe in peace. I belong to a generation that we've been disappointed. We tasted the peace in Oslo, and boom, things collapsed in the Second Intifada. The Second Intifada depended on us, on our generation, the high school, the university students too. We've been the flame, and we've been the fuel for the Second Intifada. So a friend of mine approached me in 2014 during the Gaza war, and he said, come on, let's try to do one of these Western European peaceful protests. And it was for me a joke, honestly, because protest for us, it means we bring tires, we flame tires, we throw cocktail bottles, we throw stones. This is a protest for us. So how come we do a peaceful one? He said, let's do these European ones with candles, and we stay at the checkpoint, and it will be fun. Media would love it. So
the biggest demonstration I have seen in...
we ended up having this huge, one of the biggest marches in Palestine. At that time, I was in Ramallah, so we marched around 50,000 people marched from Ramallah to Jerusalem.
Those young people had reached the Israeli checkpoint.
And when we reached the Qalandia checkpoint, which is a big checkpoint between Ramallah and Jerusalem, unfortunately, the Israeli soldiers opened fire on us.
And they are engaging in clashes with them.
I was with the first rows of the march.
Bashar and some friends were crouching down. His friend saw the red light from a sniper gun aimed right at Bashar's head. They warned him, "Move, get up, get out of the way." So he stood up, and the sniper immediately shot him in the leg.
Bashar's injury is one of the most common among Palestinian protesters. Along with rubber bullets and tear gas, firing at demonstrators' legs is a known method Israeli soldiers use for quote-unquote riot control measures.
We had around 300 Palestinians been injured with live bullets. I was one of these people.
The protest Bashar attended was 2 weeks into the 2014 Israel-Gaza war. The organizers may have hoped for things to stay peaceful, but according to reports, the crowd of 10,000 Palestinians marching towards the Israeli border checkpoint also contained masked individuals who were armed with guns, firecrackers, and stones. Israeli soldiers killed 2 protesters who, IDF officials say, were armed and fired first.
It is too early to say. This is the beginning of the third intifada, but the Palestinian president, Mahmoud Abbas, had definitely called for one 2 days ago. Nawal Assad, Qalandia checkpoint.
By the time the ambulance arrived, Bashar had bled so much that he had lost consciousness. He woke up in the hospital hours later. Only after multiple surgeries and rounds of physiotherapy was he able to walk again.
Imagine lying on the couch without, the ability to walk. All these nights filling me with anger and thinking how to revenge seeking, and how the language of peace and peaceful resistance do not work with this, racist killing occupation. And it was a kind of hard time for me. until I got my first baby girl, Luna, in 2016. And this changed my life, because when I saw this little innocent baby, I just gave her the promise that I will do my best, just that this innocent face would never face the same miserable childhood I had, the pain I had, all this, hard moments in my life. And since then, I start to take it from a different point of view. I start to study this conflict, understand how we can solve it, how we can overcome the challenges. And I ended up a researcher in conflict resolution and development. And since then, I was heavily involved in the Shared Society co-resistance community and co-resistance camp that brings Palestinians and Israelis to this field. 1 week before October 7th, I always like to share this story. I had an advocacy tour with my Israeli colleagues and very influential people in the Gaza envelope area where October 7th happened. And part of our advocacy tour was warning, and we've been warning the audience that an explosion might happen. Honestly, we didn't expect the scale of October 7th, but we saw it because life before October 7th in Gaza and West Bank and East Jerusalem was miserable, and the occupation was like, it was more than occupation. You can sense the regime in every single thing you witness in that life. So, and the vacuum was a result. And, nature do not tolerate with vacuum. We can see adopting these conflict management policies in this place for many years will lead to explosion.
When that explosion did tragically happen, it was more devastating than Bashar could have imagined. Since the war began, he said he's lost 157 members of his family in Gaza to bombing and starvation, including Ahmed, Mazen, and Abdallah, killed just this past September. Bashar faced a choice, the same one that his grandfather and so many others had faced in the decades before, between the place he devoted his life to and the people that he lived for, between his past and his future.
The continuous trauma and losses changed a bit my mind, and honestly, as a parent, witnessing in West Bank and Gaza, being in funerals and burying my friends' kids while they're on their way to school or back from school to home, and made me very terrified about my kids. As a father, I'm a father of 4 beautiful kids, and this changed my mind.
And so when he had a chance to move his family to Canada, he took it.
Chapter 2. Nikki. Go ahead, Nikki. Tell us your story.
Do you want me to start from my beginning, or do you want me to start
Not all the way, but like where? Give us the elevator pitch.
Oh, the elevator pitch. Oh my God. So I grew up in the suburbs of Toronto in Canada, and I grew up, going to Hebrew school, going to, being part of a Reformed Jewish synagogue, and being very much interested in Israel and my connection to Israel, considering myself a Zionist, being part of a social justice family.
Nikki Landau grew up in the 70s and 80s, a time when political identities and imagined political futures were a lot more varied than they seem today.
At the time, those two things, didn't surprise people, that they went together, that you could be a social justice activist and at the same time be a Zionist.
In 1979, Menachem Begin, Israel's first right-wing prime minister, gave up a huge swath of territory in exchange for a peace treaty with Egypt. Egypt, historically Israel's most fearsome enemy, became the first Arab state to officially recognize Israel. And as the 1990s came around and the Soviet Union crumbled, there was hope for a new world. A better world. But we know how this story ends.
I had dreams of living in Israel one day, of making Aliyah, and I visited there several times. And I was there when I was 17, and when I was 17, a good friend of mine who was on a trip, one of the trips of their Jewish teenagers that would go, was killed in a terrorist bombing, in a Hamas bombing on a Tel Aviv beach.
The victim was Marnie Kimmelman, also 17, also from Toronto. And just an hour away, Nikki waited for a friend who would never show up.
And I was supposed to meet her that night in Jerusalem. So I was waiting for her in Jerusalem, and she was killed in a bombing. And that really changed my life.
The attack was part of the First Intifada, a widespread uprising among Palestinian people involving both nonviolent and violent protests, civil disobedience, and assaults on Israeli citizens. One retaliatory attack led to another, leaving behind hundreds of dead, including Marnie Kimmelman. Her brother Jason spoke about her on the radio in the summer of 2025.
You lost your sister in 1990.
I did, 35 years ago. I was 14, so I've been sort of feeling this anger, sadness, rage for quite a long time. And since October 7th, it's just gotten way worse. I mean, she was 17, beautiful girl, working on a kibbutz in the summertime, a summer trip, an organized trip like so many people I know have done, picking tomatoes, picking cherries during the day, swimming in a pool at night, just having a wonderful time. They had a day off on a weekend. They could have gone to Jerusalem or Tel Aviv. My sister loved the beach. She loved the sun. I was told, I mean, I was 14 at the time, I was told there were thousands of people on the beach that day, and an explosion went off, and one person was murdered, and that was my sister. There was a pipe bomb buried in the sand, and it went off, and she was killed.
Police arrested and sentenced Yasser Hijazi to life in prison in connection with the murder. But then in 2011, Hijazi was set free, along with 1,026 other Palestinian prisoners.
When my sister's killer was released, it was in exchange for Gilad Shalit in 2011. Gilad Shalit was taken prisoner by Hamas in 2005, an Israeli soldier, and he spent 6 years in a tunnel in Gaza. He was same as our hostages now.
At the time, Jason wrote an op-ed for the CJN.
I know that this is an unrealistic proposition, given the nature and confidentiality of the negotiations between Israel and Hamas. But if Netanyahu's office had called me beforehand to ask my permission to release the beast who killed my sister in exchange for Gilad's freedom, I would have eventually granted it. I would have eventually worked through the anger and realized that no one is bringing my sister back. And if, in some way, my sister's death could help the Shalits end their nightmare, I would have given the Israeli government my blessing. But my family was not consulted. We did not have the opportunity to think this through. We were pulled out of bed with email notifications that the scabs on our lifelong and deep wounds were to be ripped off. I feel ripped off.
If my sister's death could cause some happiness to Gilad Shalit's family, of course I'm for it. Bring him home. He's my brother. I've spent time with Gilad in Israel. I mean, I feel terrible for him, obviously, and he's, you know, it's just an awful situation. But of course, I was all for it.
For Nikki, there was the trauma of the event and the trauma of the reaction to it.
And in a way, I think I'm still responding to not just to the loss of her and what that meant for, you know, my friends and my community and her family, but also what I saw unravel afterwards, which was that I had a sort of idealistic view where I thought that the response to her death would be to say, we need to have peace now. No children should ever be killed in a conflict like this. We need to have peace. And instead, what I saw was that things escalated, and that in fact her death was used as a way to escalate and means more deaths, you know, right up until the present day. So that became something that was really important to me. I explored that idea in theater because I started out as an actor. And at the same time, I have a family of conflict resolvers.
Nikki comes from a long line of mediators.
My mom.
Barbara Landau is a family mediator who was awarded the Order of Canada.
She's absolutely a powerhouse in conflict resolution. My dad was also.
Nikki's late father, Cy Landau, worked in organizational mediation. And her brother, Darrell Landau, is a mediator who specializes in human rights.
Go back to my great-grandfather sitting in Kensington Market and resolving community conflicts for chickens in exchange for chickens.
And Nikki, she got into conflict resolution too, but she also fell into the theater world. As she got older, she found herself unable to separate her artistic passion
from her family heritage.
So I started to explore that, and I mixed theater and conflict resolution in a play called Territories, which was about my experience.
It was a play within a play where a Jewish woman, played by Nikki, is talking to the audience about living in Israel until a Palestinian man gets up out of the audience, interrupts the show, and demands space to tell his side of the story too.
And then I continued on.
Can you stop for a second?
Yeah.
One line
Yeah.
that I was reading about the play, there was something about how hard it is when both people want to be seen as the victim. And I was wondering if you can explore, just tell us a bit more about that and how it worked out, because
Yes.
I think that this is at the core of where we're at. How did you explore that? And tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah, Avi, I mean, you really nailed it. So while I was writing Territories, I was also at a conflict resolution workshop one day, and I opened up a magazine. I was sitting on the table, and it was a therapy magazine. And it had this idea for therapists that there's a conflict narrative, a conflict triangle. When we tell our conflict stories, we tell them in a victim, villain, hero triangle. Most of the time when we tell our conflict stories, we tell it as if we're the victim in the story, because that's how we see ourselves. And we perpetuate the triangle no matter where we enter the triangle. So if we enter as the victim, there's got to be a villain, there's got to be a hero, it's going to continue. If we enter as the hero, same thing. There needs to be a victim somewhere. And we need that victim to stay a victim. And I realized that this narrative that I was seeing on a page in a magazine fit exactly the play that I was writing. I thought, oh my gosh, that's exactly it. It's a battle over narrative as much as anything. If, as a Jew, if I'm not the victim, if the Palestinian person is the victim, then I must be a villain. And I can't accept that. That can't be true. As opposed to starting to think that there's an inclusive victimhood. And in fact, the two stories only make sense with each other and any other way, and we're just continuing this conflict forever.
Chapter 3. Where do we go from here?
I want to move on and talk about the project that you guys are involved in right now, this listening tour going around. I would love a brief overview of what you've been doing and what you're planning on doing with it.
First of all, Bashar and I met while doing a professional, like a dialogue for people on this issue. He was a speaker and I was a facilitator. And then we were brought together to have a dialogue ourselves for a conference.
Genuine dialogue across differences seems rarer and rarer today. We're at a peak moment of polarization and tension, and peak animosity towards the other. Our friends, our symbols, and our votes, they all seem to boil down to a single question. Are they on my team?
And he and I realized that we really had sort of, on paper, we had opposing stories in the sense that we both had losses from this conflict, which to me actually, it makes us come at this problem the same way, where we really, want to say, enough, let's talk to each other, right? The losses aren't worth it. So Bashar and I had met that way. Then one day he called me, for me out of the blue, and he asked me if I was interested in doing a project with him about to reduce polarization in Canada. And I was so amazed and so thrilled.
Bashar had been approached by a woman named Shlomit Broder. Shlomit is the CEO of a Canadian NGO called Digital Public Square.
Digital Public Square got some grant funding for an anti-hate project to focus on how the Israel-Palestine conflict has affected Canadians online.
There is the traditional, conventional, and medieval Western anti-Semitism taking place, and there is now hate. Hate that's connected, hate that's contagious. It's connected when we're talking about Islamophobia, anti-Palestinian racism, anti-Arab narrative, anti-Jewish narrative. It's anti-Semitism, and it's a mix of all these kinds of hates reflecting on this cause and causing this unbelievable polarization.
Bashar believes that if we can educate Canadians about how hate and fear spread based on our identities, then we could help people have these difficult conversations on their own.
When I came here, honestly, I was I came with a stereotype that Canadians are kind. If Canadians do disagree, they will disagree with a polite cultural discussion over dinner, and next day everything will go okay. But reality was so different. I was shocked by the amount of hate and polarization and how things are taking. I lived in dictatorships before, and I witnessed when people are afraid to express their feelings, and it was justified. But I never expected in Canada to see a professor afraid to discuss a book. Even the academia was affected, where people are losing jobs. So unfortunately, my trauma came because I'm coming from that place. I'm coming from that dark place when people not only normalize with hate, people justify hate, people justify horrible things, and people cheer and support horrible things.
They looped in Nikki. The two began mapping out a huge multi-year project. They would embark on a cross-country tour where they would gather Jews and Muslims together in one room, completely confidential, and just talk, understand their point of view, and see if they could understand each other.
Can I just say, because I'm laughing here, Bashar, because Bashar always says to me before we go into a dialogue, he goes, I'm not going to be Canadian about this. He goes, I'm not going to ask the easy question.
I love it.
I'm going to really challenge them with the question. I love it too, actually. And he always is like, I'm not going to go easy. I'm not going to be Canadian, right? And I send him notes going, you can ask whatever question you want, but please don't traumatize the participants. I would just like to not traumatize them. And we always have a laugh because, I think the participants, being Canadian, are often very excited to actually have an honest conversation and to really know that they can survive it, right? Like a lot of this is about building resilience in our society to having tough conversations. We've forgotten how to have tough conversations. And what amazes me is what lengths people are willing to go to avoid having a hard conversation. People will leave jobs, they'll leave relationships, they'll hold themselves up in their homes and not go out rather than actually just having a conversation.
These are lengthy sessions, like 4 hours long. Bashar and Nikki bring sandwiches, coffee, water. Sometimes chairs are arranged in a circle. Everyone goes around, shares how they're feeling and what brought them there. At one point, everyone faces the front, where Bashar and Nikki present their ideas and outline their strategies.
So far, Bashar and Nikki have held talks in Halifax, Montreal, and across the Toronto area. They have plans to visit Vancouver and Winnipeg soon. No two sessions are the same, but in every one, Bashar likes to get to the root of the issue. Why can't people speak to the other side? How is their identity tied to the conflict? Do people feel less Palestinian or less Jewish for even sitting in the same room?
People have pre-assumptions before coming to these sessions that, this legitimate fear of normalization, legitimate fear of losing your identity, of feeling less Palestinian for talking with a Jew, feeling less Jew and betraying your identity for talking for a Palestinian. But also there is a fact that you will be surprised that most of Jews and Palestinians I met, their only source of information about the other is coming from their same, if you ask a Jew, what do you know about Palestinians? You will find that this Jew source of information coming from a Jewish source of information. And this applies also for Palestinians.
Oftentimes what people are coming together to talk about are the fact that they have felt such deep emotions, whether they are feelings of shame, which are very hard for people to say, or feelings of helplessness. People have felt very, very helpless. A lot of times what we're doing is helping them to kind of unravel misunderstandings that they have about each other. And this is one of the things that I think is one of the sort of biggest tragedies I see in our communication here, is that we really don't understand here how much people are working together on the ground there, right? The way that Israelis, Israeli Jews, Israeli Palestinians, and Palestinians in the territories, they have to talk to each other. They have to work together. And when we encourage them from here to hate each other or to fight each other. We're making their lives so much worse.
By the end of this project, after they've spoken to groups across the country and collected other data points beyond the walls of these private conversations, Bashar and Nikki plan to craft a toolkit, something tangible and actionable. They want to have something to give to workplaces, governments, organizations, and anyone else looking for a roadmap to dialogue.
Hopefully it's going to be a toolkit that might be helpful for workplaces, for homes, for families, because it's a fact that this polarization is diminishing, like horizontally, vertically, within the same communities, other communities everywhere, or you name it, like it's everywhere. You can see it. So we hope that we can, but I hope we have this magical stick or formula or catalog that we can share it and it will solve the issue. No, because it's part of us being humans, to love and hate and to judge and to be more comfort with same people. That's why you and Jafar, you don't have these, because you're in the same place, you agree on many things, so it's comfortable for you. But I'm gonna share a 30 years of peace building human rights experience back home between Palestinians and Israelis, and we have a big mistake we've done, that we always dealt with the converted people. We always dealt with people who would like to listen to what we're saying, and this is a huge mistake. You and us and everyone needs to go to the non-converted people, the people who are on the edge that might probably disagree with us, and from there we can start to.
I also think that when people see each other face to face and they hear each other talk, they realize, wow, you're actually a really reasonable person. Someone in the group who's Jewish will cry when they hear this story of what's happening to the Palestinian Canadian or the Arab Canadian. When they hear about how fearful they are, they'll say, I'm fearful too. And oftentimes we've had people at the end of a session who didn't know each other at the beginning. A Palestinian person will say, hey, I'll drive you home. Where are you going? To the Jewish person. Or they'll say, I'd like to keep in touch with you. Can we meet sometimes, right? It really is this horrible misunderstanding that we have, that we're somehow going to be in danger if we get to know each other. And that, for me, is one of the easiest blocks to take away. If we get people in the room with each other, and then they leave feeling like some huge burden that they've been carrying around, a fear has been removed, and they can take the next step, which is to find out, what can I do, right? What can I do to actually make this better for Israelis and Palestinians and for people here in Canada? How can I make it better? Because I'm not making it better by increasing the conflict. That only hurts.
Coming up on In Good Faith, a glimpse of hope from Canadian campuses.
We went in with the objective of having conversation, but what I didn't realize was it was the wrong crowd of people.
The encampment was good insofar as it brought a lot of attention to a problem.
These people, and I was speaking to Jews in the encampment. I was not speaking to Arabs. It was those people who are supposed to be my people who could not understand our struggle either.
I'm not an Abraham Accords type person. I don't want peace for the sake of having peace because it's nice. Of course, we're all Abraham's children and it would be nice to get along. But peace has to come with justice, right? I'm still going to advocate for the Palestinian people.
I was like, why should I condemn my government? I have family who served in the IDF. They're amazing people. I don't think that they're bad people. And it took me a year, really, to really digest that conversation.
But in terms of slogans, they're easy to be misunderstood, and there's kind of a logic in being a diplomat. And I think there's a logic in being a diplomat because, one, not only do we have to come to a solution there, but even in Toronto and in Canada, we go to school together, we work together, so on. We want to be able to have conversations.
Again, these are hard conversations to have. I like when we do dialogue, everyone has a chance to speak.
This has been In Good Faith, a podcast produced by the Canadian Jewish News, sponsored by the Canadian Race Relations Foundation, with support from the Ronald S. Roadberg Foundation. Our production team is Zach Kaufman and Michael Freeman.
If you think someone you know would appreciate this episode, please share it with them.
Thanks for listening.